first song tonight will be 626. 626. Christ for the world we sing, the world to Christ they bring, with loving zeal, the poor and them that mourn the faint and Lord, sin, sick and sorrow, whom Christ appeal. Christ for the world we sing, the world to Christ we bring, with fervent prayer, the wayward and the lost by restless acts and thoughts, redeemed their countless thoughts from dark despair. Christ is for the world we sing, the world to Christ we bring, with one accord, with us a word to share, with us free, with us our there for Christ our Lord. Page 709. 709. How sweet, how heavenly is the sight when those that love the Lord in one another's needs see light and so fulfill the word. When he can feel his brother's side and with him make apart, when sorrow flows from eye to eye and joy from heart to heart, when free from envy, scorn, and pride, our wishes all above, each can his brother's failings hide and show a brother's love. When love in one delightful stream through every bosom flows, when union sweet and dear esteem in every action glows. Love is the golden chain that binds the happy souls above, and he's an heir of heaven who finds his bosom glow with love. 763. Brother Al. 763. Oh, Master, let me walk with thee in lowly wrath on service free. Tell me thy secret, help me bear the strain of toil, the freight of care. Help me the soul of heart to move by some clear living word of love. Teach me the It's almost page 922. 922. Good evening. Now, most of this study, when we speak of angels, we are speaking of the heavenly host. I think that would be the best way to describe it. Those beings that God created that are different from us. They don't have flesh and blood, and they operate in a different realm than we do most of the time. But every now and then, we have more of the human angel around. Somebody's frowning and everything, but we do get told that in the Hebrew writer says that some have entertained angels unaware. And I have no doubt that that is talking about some of the heavenly hosts, but then some of those are sent by God, maybe in a human form or a human being. I'm thinking of one right now that's quiet as a church mouse. Ray mentioned this morning how God sent an angel to minister to Jesus when he was praying in Gethsemane garden. Somebody who I will not mention snuck in here Friday morning. I think it was Friday. Might have been Thursday. As quiet as could be, came in to my door and left a card of encouragement, which was greatly needed. And I appreciate that. But I just want to mention that sometimes we can do the work of God in a quiet. They weren't seeking any acknowledgement or retribution, but we can do little things like that, and we can actually be that little messenger that perhaps God didn't give us the message, but it's what he told us we need to do. And we want to appreciate that. So the nature of angels, that's what our lesson is on. What is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you visit him? For you have made him a little lower than the angels, and you have crowned him with glory and honor. There is a statement here. This is actually made concerning man, but notice that little lower than the angels. That means they have a higher abode than we have. It is interesting that we ought to consider their nature. It's a lot like things are like ours, but there are other things that are not like ours, differences that we have, things that we probably wish we had that we're probably better off not having, if you want to think about it sometimes. The fact that it actually says there's a difference between us and them speaks that God recognizes things. We have an understanding that the angels have desire to look into. And so when we think about those things, we put it together. That says they're a little lower than angels, that they are superior to us. But that does not make them to be worshiped. Notice John in Revelation 22, verse 8 and 9, he says, Now I, John, saw and heard these things, and when I heard and saw, I fell down to worship before the feet of the angel who showed me these things. Then he said to me, See that you do not do that, for I am your fellow servant and of your brethren the prophets and those who keep the words of this book, worship God. That is important to remember. Why is that?
Now, no one else before me has done
Have no one else before me. That includes angels. How many today are teaching that you can worship angels? How many want to worship angels? How many want to worship mankind? Different people in me. There is a difference between saying I worship the ground my wife walks on and actually worshiping an angel as being deserving of godly worship. To be held in that kind of awe. In 2007, something that really disturbed me, I had been given a trip and I went on it, and a lot of it went through a lot of these statues that people tend to worship of a particular religion. And what was sad was it was with a church group, and all our own people were in gaga over these things. Let me put it that way, because that's what they were. They were in awe. They were awesome. They were ready to fall down and worship. That is not to us. That is not to be us. We are God. There is no creating being of worship.
I've been listening to her reading, and God talks about a guy. I think he does use his recipe. But here a guy takes wood and he cooks with part of it, the other half cuts, said, "Through my God, deliver me." And God says, "Worship a block of wood."
Yeah, things without no being. We do the wrong thing. Paul warns us in Colossians chapter 2, verse 18 through 19, "Let no one cheat you of your reward, taking delight in false humility and worship of angels, intruding in those things which he has not seen, vainly puffed up by his fleshly mind, and not holding fast to the head, from whom all the body, nourished and knit together by joints and ligament, grows with increase that is from God." Paul says these people will take you away from God. They will cheat you of your reward. You'll end up being lost. And what will they be teaching? Notice that. False humility and the worship of angels. It's interesting. I was thinking about this today. You go to Luke chapter 2, and you see the announcement of Jesus' birth by one angel to many shepherds, and then the whole heavenly host, or a heavenly host, joins in the singing, and none of those shepherds fell down to worship them. They didn't have to rebuke them. They understood. They had seen a marvelous sight. But if you go through and you read that chapter, there is only one that they go to worship, and that is that child in the manger. They didn't worship Mary. They didn't worship Joseph. They didn't worship those angels, but they did offer worship unto that child. So we kind of might think, well, we can get overwhelmed easily with an angel, but do we have to? Now, granted, if we saw everything John saw, we'd probably be a little overwhelmed too. And who's to say we don't know it, but John might have even thought that this was actually the Lord that was speaking to him at that time. 1 Peter 3:21-22, he says there's an awesome antitype which now saves us, baptism, not the removal of the filth of flesh, but the answer of good conscience toward God, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven, is at the right hand of God, angels and authorities and powers having been made subject to him. There is another reason why we should not be worshiping angels. Though they may be superior to us, they are in subjection to God, in subjection to Christ. That's what the angel was trying to get across to John. I'm no different from you in my regard to God. I'm just a fellow servant. They are spiritual beings. Hebrews 1:7, of the angels, he said, who makes his angel spirits and his ministers a flame of fire? And that's a quote from Psalms 104, verses 4 and 5. Who makes his angel spirit, ministers fire? You who laid foundations of the earth, so it should not be moved forever. The point I put in that second verse is so it points out who is the he? It is God, the one who laid the foundations of the earth. So when we look at this point and them being spiritual beings, does not mean that they never take the form of a man, but even when they do, it's not flesh and blood. The appearance. Difference between Christ and the angels. Luke 24:39, behold my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have. See, there's a point there that even when an angel appears as a man, it's still not a man. It doesn't have the flesh and bones we do. A reminder that we one day will have a spiritual body. It is sown a natural body, is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. Now that's where a lot of confusion gets into. How is it both spiritual and how is it resurrected? Well, let me give you the short answer. Just wait till the day of judgment and you'll understand. Because that's the only time you will. Even Paul sits there and says, I do not know what nature body will be, but that'll be a spiritual body. There are different spirits. Jesus points out in Matthew 12:43-45, when an unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places seeking rest and finds none. Then he says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when he comes, he finds it empty, swept, and put in order. Then he goes and takes with him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter there. And the last state of that man is worse than first, so it shall also be with this wicked generation. That was a warning to the Jews of that day. It's going to be harder if you go back into these things. Notice that man had gotten rid of his unclean spirit, and yet it came back in. Do we recognize everything Jesus is trying to teach us about the spirit, spiritual beings, when we let them take over us? So think about this. When a person leaves a sinful life and comes to the Lord, what has he done? Well, he's swept his house and put it in order. What happens when he leaves the Lord?
The fruit of the Spirit.
It makes it even harder for him to come. That's why the Hebrew writer gives the warning about willful sin. Because as it goes in, we get more entrenched in it. Yep. As Peter would say, Ron pointed out, a dog returned to its own vomit. But Peter, in that same context of 2 Peter chapter 2, says it would have been better for them to never have known the truth than to have known it and turned back into unrighteousness. And then he makes that point. Again, at Luke 8:29-33, knowing this point, I want to understand that we pointed out that the angels are subjected to Christ. The heavenly hosts, the righteous angels, freely choose to be subjected to Christ. The devil and his angels Don't freely choose to be, but don't have a choice either. Notice in verse 29, for he commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man, for it had often seized him, and he was kept under guard, bound with chains and shackles, and he broke the bond and was driven by the demon into the wilderness. Jesus asked him, saying, what is your name? And he said, Legion, because many demons had entered him. And they begged him that he should not command them to go out into the abyss. Now a herd of many swine was feeding there on the mountain, so they begged him that he would permit them to enter them, and he permitted it. Then the demons went out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd ran violently down the steep place into the lake and drowned. They didn't have a choice but to obey whatever he commanded. Somebody asked me once, do we have demon possession today? We read the New Testament, let's understand some things. How did people get rid of a demon? From what we read. Huh? Through a miracle. From what we read, someone had to cast that demon out. Such as Paul did with the young lady at Ephesus. Philippi. So they end up in jail. Who has those miracle abilities today? Not men. Okay? So, God being a just God, would he allow demons to overtake people today when he doesn't have anyone on earth able to cast them out? No. And that's why we don't have them anymore on earth. Huh? Well, I'm not saying there's not service of the devil still around us, and some people basically will let them take over their whole lives.
We still wrestle with the devil on the individual.
We wrestle with the devil. My point of it is the difference between devil and demon possession. Okay.
We're not free of it.
We're not free of the devil. Okay. He has not been restrained except in allowing someone to be demon possessed as this man was. That's my point there. This type of demon possession doesn't mean that we don't have to wrestle with temptation and that the devil himself will draw us into sin. And some people get so far into it that you would think they were possessed because they have let sin completely rule over their lives, to the point they don't even have the reasoning ability anymore. There we go. They permitted it. So, in Daniel, we find Gabriel and Michael being mentioned. Verse 12 to 14 we read, do not fear, Daniel, from the first day that you set your heart to understand, to humble yourself before your God. Your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. So God sent the angel. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, and behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the kings of Persia. Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days. I want you, and then verse 20 says, and now I must return to fight with the prince of Persia. Can people resist an angel?
We're told to resist the devil and he's the fallen angel.
There you go. We're told to resist the devil, and he's the fallen angel. That's what Ray said, and that's true. And notice it goes on the other side too. says the prince of Persia, the kings of Persia were resisting the angel.
Isn't there a verse that even if an angel or messenger of God comes to you after what I have told you? Genesis
chapter 1, verses 6 through 9. Galatians, thank you. It started with a G. Galatians 1, verse 6 through 9, Paul writes about them turning away from the gospel. And he says, if anyone comes to you and teaches any other gospel, let him be accursed. I say again, if even an angel from heaven comes to you and preaches any other gospel than the one I have brought to you, let him be accursed. So there is a point there that we should understand that we are to resist any angel that is not following God. That's the truth of it, is it would be an angel that devil, but is he going to sit there and say, hey guys, I'm an angel of the devil? That's the sad part. But you're right. In truth, it would not be an angel from heaven, but an angel from the devil.
The devil is not a truth, and he is of deceit.
Yeah, that is the devil's weapon, is deceit. Angels are powerful. In 2 Thessalonians 1:7, we get, speaking to the Thessalonian Christians, Paul talking about it, that it's a just thing to give you who are troubled rest with us when the Lord Jesus revealed from heaven with his mighty angels. Literally calls them mighty. What else does he say in that context? Taking vengeance upon those who do not know the Lord or obey the gospel. Second.
In Revelation, it only took one angel to bind the devil and throw him into the abyss.
It only took one angel to keep the body of Moses away from the devil, too. As he said, only one angel. Here, they are very powerful. And we'll get into a minute where they get that power from. 2 Kings 19:35, and it came to pass on a certain night that the angel of the Lord went out and killed in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when people arose early in the morning, there were the corpses all dead. You know the context. A couple of days before, they'd been threatening Hezekiah with overcoming Jerusalem. And the people were scared. 185,000.
They had a lot of people praying.
Huh?
They had a lot of people praying that they would get help from this group.
Well, that is no doubt in the context, but the point of it is that God delivered them. God had delivered them. And that is the thing. In 2 Samuel 24, verses 15 through 16, so the Lord sent a plague from Israel upon Israel. From the morning till the appointed time, from Dan to Beersheba, 70,000 men of the people died. You know what context this is and why? David has sought to number the people, a thing he'd been taught to do. And it tells us in 2 Samuel that he kept asking the Lord to allow him to number the people. Chronicles tells us that the devil enticed David to go to the Lord concerning numbering the people. Why? Why was that wrong?
Of David or of the?
Of David.
Because God told him not to do it.
Because God had told him not to do it. But what did he tell them in the law, and why did he tell them not to number the people?
So that they wouldn't trust in the amount of army that they had.
There you go. So unless they trust in themselves and not him.
Is that where we get the idea of be careful what you pray for?
That's one of the things, yeah. You pray enough for something God don't want to give you, and he gives it to you, you may not want it. You may realize you're better off without it. No, when the angel stretched out his hand over Jerusalem to destroy it, the Lord relented from the destruction and said to the angel who was destroying, enough, now restrain your hand. And the angel of the Lord was by the door of Arnanah the Jebusite. There's the point about the power. How much power can they use?
Only what God gives them.
Only what God allows them. We just read of an angel killing 185,000 Assyrians, but here he only killed 70,000 Israelites.
Do we have to be careful how much information from Old Testament about angels we bring forward into the New Testament time? Because it's two different, very different dispensations of how God dealt with people. We don't read this kind of stuff in the New Testament about angels doing this thing. So when we see 185,000 people getting killed in a tsunami, we say an angel did that.
Well, we do have to be careful what we apply to it. The reality that the powerfulness that they have, and that goes back to that point of making the statement that demons can no longer possess men because God has restrained that, not restraining the devil from leading us into temptation and wrestle with us. That's the same point here. He restrained this angel from doing any further destruction. And so what power he chooses to allow them to do, we do not know. Okay? Here comes the reality. This plague that was from the angel was sent by God. And how do we know that? Because he tells us. So we can't just sit there and make a supplication that we see a tsunami and all these people die, that was God sending an angel to bring destruction upon them. Because we don't know that. We can't say that. There are things we can say about it. Did God allow it? Yeah. We have all these hurricanes we see them. Did God allow them? Yes. Was he with people? Yes. Well, was it time for others that their lives were over and it was said and done? Yes.
They have a little different function. According to Hebrews, they got a little different function in the New Testament time than they did.
Yeah, and we'll get to that.
Okay.
Right now, we're just talking about their nature. Okay? So that we have a better understanding of it. This is one of those points where it's kind of interesting. You have to reading all this powerfulness. Look at Genesis 32, verse 24, 26. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. And when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip. And the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go, for the day break. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. What happens here when he blesses him? Changes his name from Jacob to Israel. What did Israel mean? He tells him why he changed it. Because you have wrestled with both God and man and prevailed. But it's an interesting point. Could that angel have defeated Jacob? Easily. Easily, except God restrained what power he could use. speaking of that moment, or speaking of Jacob in Hosea 12:3-4, he took his brother by the heel of the womb, and in his strength he struggled with God. Yes, he struggled with the angel and prevailed. He wept and sought favor from him. Some say that was probably the changing of Jacob's attitude was that night that he wrestled. Restraining of their power, Job 1:12, and the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power, only do not lay a hand on his person. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. As far as we know, the only thing that Satan can really do to us today is tempt us. And even then, he was restrained in how much temptation he can bring upon us. Who knows what 1 Corinthians 10:13 says? No temptation has come upon you that is not common to man. But with every temptation, God provides a way of escape. The promise is he won't bring any temptation upon us that we cannot bear. Here comes reality. You're not going to like it. Every time we sin, did we have to? Was a temptation so great that we couldn't turn it down? Because if it had been so great that we couldn't turn it down, God would not have let it happen to us. He's made a way of escape. The problem was we didn't look for it. Some angels have flight, some are able to levitate. Daniel 9:21-23. Yes, while I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, being caused to fly swiftly, reached me about the time of the evening offering. I've left some little pieces out, and talked with me and said, "Oh, Daniel, I have now come forth to give you skill to understand. At the beginning of our supplications, a command went out, and I have come to tell you, for you are greatly beloved. Therefore, consider the matter and understand the vision." Know what he said? Being caused to fly swiftly. God has commanded me to come to you. You want to know a special part about that other? Look at that last. I have come to tell you, for you are greatly beloved. Therefore, consider the matter and understand the vision. God has given us his word because we are greatly beloved. The ability to reason and understand is purely out of love. This is going back to that context where David had numbered the people, 1 Chronicles 21:16. Then David lifted his eyes and saw the angel of the Lord standing between earth and heaven, having in his hand a drawn sword stretched out over Jerusalem. So David and the elders, clothed in sackcloth, fell on their faces. Seeing the angel floating, just as we see in Luke chapter 2, the angel appearing in the sky. They are intelligent. It's kind of interesting that this is applied, but God kind of puts it that way. In speaking to David, your maidservant said, the word of my Lord the king will now be comforting, for as the angel of God, so is my Lord the king in discerning good and evil. My Lord is wise according to the wisdom of the angel of God to know everything that is in the earth. And making this statement about David, she makes this statement about the angels of God. They have wisdom. They discern good and evil. Think what the devil tempted Eve with. Know to make you wise, able to discern good and evil. Did the devil know what he was doing when he was tempting Eve? And it worked. But my point is, he was doing the very same thing. He knew the difference between good and evil and was offering it to her in order to get her to sin. So all the devil and his angels have chose the evil over the good. The angel speaking to Lot, this talks a little more about their limited. Said to him, see, I have favored you concerning the thing also, and that I will not overthrow the city for which you have spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there. Therefore, the name of the city was called Zoar. See what? Genesis chapter 19, Abraham's making a deal. Pleading with God over how many righteous men he'll spare Sodom for. Gets down to 10 and realizes that's the best I can do. How many did God actually find? He was sparing 4, lost one of them, say 3. One for sure. Peter even calls him that righteous Lot. You understand, before Abraham ever started bargaining, God had already planned to save Lot. This angel had already been sent and told that he could not do anything till Lot was spared.
Deal with the Jews in the diamond business. They already got a number in their mind when they start the marketing. Abraham started at 100, but he knew that Lot and his family had 10 people. And so he was going, that's the number he was headed for.
There you go. Most likely that's it. He was headed there. Oh, God's angels, and I specify this because you can't say angels are holy, because not all angels are holy. God's angels are holy. Matthew 25:31, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. Daniel chapter 4, verses 13 and 23, Nebuchadnezzar speaks, I saw in the visions of my head while on my bed, there was a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven. And as much as the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven, saying, twice Nebuchadnezzar calls him holy. Jude 1:14, now Enoch, the son from Adam, prophesied about these men also. Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his saints. What do we call saints? Where does that word come from? Sanctified. The saints are the set apart. These angels are the set apart. They're set apart from the other angels. The devil and his angels. They're holy. They have freedom of choice. Job 4, verse 18, this is Eliphaz speaking, but you know, even when a man who doesn't understand what he's saying speaks the truth, it's still the truth. If he puts no trust in his servants, if he charges his angel with error, that's the point of who can trust with. Well, here comes reality. Are the holy angels charged with error? No. But what about the unholy? They're charged. God's just. Notice in 2 Peter 2:4, for if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment. Any idea what the next verse starts out? Then he knows how to, and he goes through this long spiel to get down all the way through Lot, deliver the righteous from the hands of evil. Revelation 12:4, his tail threw a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. Some believe in this talking about the dragon, who was the devil, that he got a third of the angels to join him. Verses 7 through 9, and war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought. But they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, the serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Even today, the devil does not work alone. How do we know that? Is the devil omnipresent? No. But he can get every one of us being tipped on all of us almost at the same time. So how does that tell us? Whether we're on this side of the earth or on the side of the other, that means he uses his angels to do the same work that he was doing then. Jude 1:6, and the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode, he has reserved an everlasting change under darkness for the judgment of the great day. Revelation 20, verse 10. The devil who deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and false prophet are, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. And the next verse begins the judgment seat. Fellow servants, as we mentioned before, verse 29 of Revelation 22, or verse 9, he points out, I am your fellow servant, and of your brethren, the prophets, and of those who keep the words of this book, worship God. Luke 15:10. Likewise, I say to you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Since God rejoices over a sinner who repents, his angels also rejoice. That is the nature of God's angels. And it is important to understand that that power is often restrained. That's what it talks about when those who were evil were restrained in the days of Noah. The devil was not allowed to bring anyone to do harm to Noah in that 100 years that he was building the ark. Later, they were restrained in punishment and torment because they died. And then he even mentions they were formerly disobedient. That's the souls that lived in Noah's time. Formerly disobedient. There are no disobedient souls in the grave. They've been disobedient on this earth. But if they could turn and do all the will of God in the grave and change their state, they would. Take a look at the rich man. You want to see an outpouring of love? Luke chapter 15. That man wanted somebody to reach his brothers. where he had been unloving on this earth and left Lazarus there at his gate begging in torment, he was seeking to be able to love. God brings us these things for us to understand. Ron's right on one thing. We have to be careful how we apply it. And that's why it's necessary that we come to an understanding about the angels so we don't misapply their work today. And that point of what they may have done at one time and unable to do today simply because of the age of miracles being ceased. But does not mean that they do not have a role today. Let's stand and sing.
I hear the Savior say, thy strength indeed is small. Child of weakness, watch and pray. I believe I know it all. Jesus paid it all. All to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. Thank everyone for being here this evening. Funny thing is, there are